Today I'm joined by fellow bootstrapper Corey Haines. Corey is founder of the Swipe Files community. He's host of the Everything is Marketing podcast, and he does several other things as well. Welcome to the show, Corey.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
It's a pleasure. In a moment, I'll ask you to tell us your backstory, but first, let's go straight into Swipe Files. What is the Swipe Files community? Who is it for, and why should we care?
Yeah, so the Swipe House community is basically, the way I describe it to my mom is it's a membership site where marketers come together and talk. That's basically it. And that really is sort of the core of it. But I guess more technically, it's a membership site. There's a community, a private community at the core of it. It's paid, so it's about $99 a year. There's also sort of a archive of teardowns. I have this actual swipe file, which I can explain what a swipe file is as well. It's
Yes,
kind of
please do.
jargony word that marketers made up. It's essentially like it's kind of interesting because in the world of like personal knowledge management, they have like a Zettelkasten, which is like this really advanced note taking system where you grab ideas from things that you read or see and capture. Even like in the design world, you have a mood board, or you have maybe just like a place where you have all of your inspiration and other designs that you like. So Swipe File is essentially that for marketers. It's a place where you keep all of the great marketing examples of landing pages and ads and emails, so that you can reference it later for inspiration, or if you need sort of a kick in the butt to get started and a place to start with, right? A little template. So Swipe Files has the community, the teardowns, an actual swipe file. I'm kind of like bolting on like all these different components to it. There's in the community, there's AMAs, and we do there's private workshops as well. But that's the gist of it.
Okay, great explanation. We'll get back to Swipe Files soon, but I'm interested a bit to know how you got to where you are today. And I think you've got kind of an interesting backstory. Do you have like the 2 or 3 minute version of how you came to be doing what you are today?
Yeah. The 3 minute version. Let's see. When I was about 19, I realized that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was on a road trip with a friend to go visit some other friends in college. And, I was asking him, hey, like, what do you want to do? What's your plan? And we hadn't caught up, for a couple of months. And so he was telling me, and then he asked me, I was like, well, I think I just want to be like, I don't know, go into accounting or finance and, get a good job at one of the top four or the big four and retire and have a family. He's all, that's it. And at the time I was super offended. I was like, that's it. Like, what? This is the American dream. Like, what are you talking about? But then as we were talking, he's a very, very entrepreneurial person. And so he gave me some homework for books to read. And of course, then I caught the entrepreneurial bug. And after that, I sort of knew that I wanted to go a little bit further than that. I wanted to do more. I didn't know exactly what it would look like or what I wanted to do. But then through college, I started, designing websites, started getting involved in helping people get their sites up or get their Shopify site up, or, just get traffic. And sort of like I was already doing a little bit of marketing. I just didn't know it yet. I was also commuting a lot. So I was listening to lots of entrepreneur podcasts and audio books and just like reading and learning ferociously. Anyways, by the time I was about to graduate college, I knew I needed to get a job. That was actually the requirement in order to get the parents' permission to marry my girlfriend, then girlfriend, now wife. And so started hitting the books and hitting Google best places to work in San Diego. Managed to land a spot as a junior marketing intern at a startup here in San Diego. Was there for a few years. I call it my crash course in marketing. Launched a couple of side projects when I was at Bmetrix, the next place I was at. And then in September, about 6 months ago, as of this recording, I left and sort of went full time out on my own. And now I do consulting and Swipe Files and have a couple other projects.
That's probably the best 3 minute summary I've ever heard. Somebody, you tell me you've practiced that.
Yeah, I mean, a few times. I'm glad. It still feels very unpolished, but
I like the bit that you pretty much got a job so you could get married. If I like really make it concise, I think I heard that right. Yeah, you
oh yeah. I
was
mean, I've always, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted a job, but that was definitely the kick in the butt to like figure it out and especially have something lined up at the time that I graduated. And so yeah, but everything's a means to an end, right? Of course, I want to have a job to support my life and live. So.
And how much time did you spend at Bmetrix?
Almost 2 years.
Okay, this is the metrics for SaaS products, right?
Correct.
We had the founder of ChartMogul on the podcast just recently, and I guess this is a competitor, same space. Yeah. And what did you learn there at Bmetrix? Was that a place where you managed to hone the skills you have today, or were you already knowing what you were doing when you went there?
Bmetrix was an amazing sort of learning experience and playground for me because one of the reasons why I took the job, why I was so interested, because I knew that I could talk to and learn from a bunch of SaaS founders and operators, and that's sort of what I wanted to do. Like by that point, after being at Cordial, I realized sort of the power and the amazing opportunity there is in SaaS startups. And so then when I was following Josh, I was reading the blog posts, listening to the podcast. I knew what it was all about, and I knew that I'd be really close to the customers. And so, like, what better way to sort of prepare myself than to be a SaaS founder, than to sort of grow, be like the one man marketing team
Hmm.
for a SaaS business, as well as get to know and talk with and sort of consult with a bunch of other SaaS businesses. So, I mean, the main thing I did was, it was growth for Bmetrix, but it was also, I mean, I was meeting 10 to 20 SaaS founders a week and getting to brainstorm about the business. How do we grow? How do we improve your metrics? And that was a really, really valuable exercise for me.
Oh, sounds like it. Let's go back to swipe files. So, um, I want to know more about what it is, but I'm also interested in the mechanics of building a community in 2021.
Mhm.
Well, you started it late last year, 2020 maybe.
Correct. Yeah, like
As I
September was when I introduced the community.
Okay, I think the way to create a community today is very different from what it was even a few years ago. And like, why did you decide to start a community and not just to stick to your podcast and other things that you do?
Yeah, the community. I mean, as of most things, I end up scratching my own itch. And so for a long time, I was really craving a private community where I could share openly, connect with people, just have a place. Besides Twitter, that was a little bit more intimate, where I could talk with people and make friends and have some sort of, people, some sort of group to fall back on and get
Hmm.
advice from and get feedback from. And so I was already working on Swy files for a while, and basically the first version was just like the teardowns and the archives. So I just build this kind of swipe file, but I also have all this commentary on what makes it good or bad or what I would change. And I had a separate idea for a marketing community. I was like, oh, why don't I just like combine the two, and I'll just like throw that in the membership to kind of sweeten the pot, and that'll be another thing that I offer. And so starting the community was really just, yeah, I mean, that's what I wanted personally. And I sort of knew that there was a lot of, most of the other marketing communities out there, it's not a knock on them, but there's very few good paid ones. And
Mm.
there's very few good ones in general, because most of them are kind of just a marketing ploy. They're,
Right,
something that
right.
people threw together on a whim. It's a Slack group. It's not really like moderated or maintained, or there's a lot of like spammy people in there. You don't really know who's there, what people are there for. And so I really wanted something that would be purpose built, that have people bought into the mission of helping each other. Also, I had this kind of this premise. I didn't know it. It's been like developing over time, but my like core thing, my core thesis is that um, diversity of thought and of people and of experience is the best way to be really, really creative. And so marketing is hard because you end up like looking at what your competitors doing, or you just look at best practices in the industry, and then you get stuck in this echo chamber where you don't actually do anything new or interesting or exciting. It's super, super boring. And but then you look outside of that. So like for me, I was stuck in this kind of SaaS echo chamber, and I was looking at what people were doing in e-commerce and in info marketing and all these other types of industries. It's like, wow, this is like some really, really creative stuff. The same goes both ways though. Like they're looking at what we're doing with SaaS, they're like, oh, that's really, really interesting. And so it's the combination of just having all these different perspectives and being able to take ideas from disparate industries that really allows you to be creative. So I wanted to create a place where we could do that, where I could just gather lots of different people and we could come together and kind of make magic.
Yeah, I like it. I should make a disclaimer here to our listeners. I am a member, a paid member of the Swipe Files community, and actually, the fact that it's paid is what attracted me. I knew that I could talk privately and openly without worrying too much about this leaving a trail behind of stuff I don't want customers to see. I think, I mean, stuff might leak out. It does whenever there's people. That doesn't worry me too much. But I just like being able to be very honest and open and hear other
Yeah.
people's stories. So yeah, that's my view on it. So I was going to ask you who the typical community members are, but I think you've already told us a very disparate amount of people. They're actually not just, for example, SaaS, or maybe not even just software, but much wider than that.
Yeah,
How
much
many?
wider. I mean, my whole goal is to make it as like diverse as possible. I think even now, like the main two segments are sort of marketers and sort of founders or entrepreneurs. Uh, Even then, like the large part of the marketers and founders are probably in SaaS or in like content in some sort of play. But I'm working also to just like make that as broad as possible, and because that really like the broader, the more diverse it gets, I think the more powerful and interesting the community gets.
Can you tell us roughly how many members or active members or paying members you have in the community?
Yeah, paying members. I have my swipefiles.com/open page, so you can look at that. It might have changed by now, but I think I have 284. But there's also like some, there's free members, there's lifetime members that I did a while back. There's
Hmm.
course community members. So I think there's somewhere around 400. I want to say.
Okay, well, that's good. It means you've got some type of critical mass going. A real problem with communities is when you start them is that no one's there. It's the founder just of the
Right.
community, maybe talking to him or herself and a couple of sock puppets. But how did you get your first members? How did you overcome that chicken and egg problem?
Oh man, I was really sweating it when I was starting the community and thinking about starting the community, and I don't think I over engineered it in hindsight. I think I actually did it really, really well and thought it through because I was deathly afraid that that would happen. That I was just like, oh, look at me. Here's this thing over here. And then it's just me. Like, and I would have to create fake profiles and respond to myself. And it would just be like, it's this weird, awkward thing. So I really put a lot of time and energy into trying to kickstart that flywheel so that there actually was a community sort of from the get go. So the very first thing that I did was I reached out, I think on Twitter was the first place that I went, and I said, "Hey, what are the marketing communities that you're a part of, or why aren't you a part of any if you aren't?" I just got a lot of people who were responding in the comments, who would reply, people who would DM me, and I was just sort of like building a list, and then from there I'd follow up with them and ask, what do you like about the community? What do you not like about that community? Or if they weren't a part of a community, what would make them interested in becoming a member of one in the future? What are they looking for? What would keep them coming around? What they think? And basically, I would just kind of like, I had like 100 DMs I just had going, concurrently trying to respond to these people to really understand what people were looking for, but also build a relationship with them because I knew that if people didn't feel a connection to me, then in the community, that's like the first piece of the puzzle is you. People have to be interested in connecting with you and that you will be there. The second piece is the other people in the community, but that's sort of easy once they're there, right? First, I have to get them there for me. So I built a sort of I mean, a shallow, but start a relationship with a lot of these people, and then did the same thing with my email newsletter. So I have a few thousand people on the newsletter there, and then asked the same exact question. Had 100 different email threads going on what people liked, didn't like, what they were, a part of, what they weren't. And then I did a similar call to action. I said, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting this. If you'd be interested, if it's a burning need for you, literally, I forget the exact words they use, but it's basically like, if this is something you have to have right now, then like DM me or reply to this email in that case, and I'll tell you more about it." And then I slowly started to curate the community and invite people in. And it was sort of like one day, I think it was on a Thursday, just like it is today. I was just like, okay, I'm letting in the floodgates. I'm going to invite everyone this day. And the first thing I'm going to ask them to do is to introduce themselves. And that way I was sort of kickstart that flywheel of, oh, there's all these people are joining. They're introducing themselves. They're being welcomed as well. And then it would feel like something is happening here, right? And then that same day I'm posting all sorts of things. I'm trying to like really connect people, and oh, like you should connect with this person, like tagging them within the community. And then I think it was within about 2 weeks it just felt like, oh, this thing has some legs and like it's just going, people are posting and it's working. So the
Wow.
plan seemed to have worked. I couldn't have, there's no like magic formula or secret sauce there. It's just kind of like the hustle and grind of connecting people.
And now I guess you've got to the point where conversations happen without you being involved at all, and you're just a spectator, unless you have something to add. And that's a really, really nice point, I would imagine, in the community in which you're just standing back and letting it happen.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think the cool part too is that one of the I was just talking with Jay Klaus from my podcast yesterday, and we were talking about community, and he's sort of like one of the community thought leaders in the space, and he's done it very successfully for several different brands and communities. And we were talking about how community is like culture, and it's culture building, and it's really at the core of it. It's about what are the things that you want members to do, and then how can you encourage them to do that thing by rewarding them in some way. And so there's a few things that I've wanted to do in the beginning. Like I really want to have a culture of being asynchronous. And
Hmm.
so actually it's not very noisy. Like if you look in the community, it's like if you join and you log in today, it's still at that point where it doesn't feel like you have to you don't have like 1,000 notifications. there
Yeah.
there aren't like 100 different conversations that you miss like it would be in Slack or in Facebook groups. Like it's still there, it's a forum, so it's threaded. Like I want it to be a place where people didn't feel anxiety about logging in, where they could sort of take out their own time. Maybe it's just once a week that they chime in, and if
Hmm.
that's worth it for them, then I will have a place for them, because in a lot of other communities they wouldn't be able to do that. So it's very much about culture building and sort of setting the tone and saying, this is how we operate, this is how we do things, and then like keeping that going. So yeah, it's very asynchronous, and I'm lucky that that's one of the core components of it.
Sounds like you've got that sweet spot at the moment where everybody can keep up with what's going on. It's hard,
Yeah,
yeah, the balance between making sure there's enough to actually be worthwhile taking part, but not so much that it's overwhelming.
it's a super
So,
delicate balance. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I like that indie hackers site, but at some point that just got to the point where I just couldn't keep up with what was going on there. So, a flood. That's I don't know. It's like a victim of success. Most of us would love to have that success, but hey, you
Yeah.
charge money. So tell us why you chose to charge money. Is it because you want to make a living from this, or is it another reason?
Yeah, I mean, not solely because I wanted to make money from it. Too, because I knew that a lot of communities were free, and so if I put some money on it, then it would get people more bought into it. And that's just sort of the culture again that I wanted to encourage, was like, you pay it forward, you pay for things that are valuable. And I just didn't know if I could curate and really deliver on a community that was free and monetize it some way down the road. And I just felt like it would get overwhelming. I was just deathly afraid of opening up the floodgates to anyone and everyone. Like I really
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be a curated experience for people who were bought into the idea, to the mission. And so that was sort of like a gatekeeper move, where like, I just want to get people who are bought in and who are interested and who find value out of it. But yeah, also I think long term, I had the idea like, well, maybe this has some legs to it and could be sort of like a launchpad business, as Andrew Wilkinson calls it, like just something that could unlock my time and sort
Mm-hmm.
of give me a little bit of financial independence to be able to work on other things like a SaaS business or just other projects I'm interested in, or there's other arms of Swipe Files I'm exploring with courses and other pieces there. And so something that could just provide some sort of monetary outcome. And now I'm getting to the interesting point where I'm starting to come up on the first renewals. So now it feels like, oh, like this, there's some compounding effects here, and like this, can be a business and not just a side project.
It's a nice feeling when those renewals happen. A really
Right.
nice feeling. So tell us about the price. I think, if I recall, it's about $80 or $100 a year for the basic membership. Is that
Yeah, $99
right?
a year for the pro membership. I'm also like experimenting. I think it's here to stay, but there's also an all access membership, which is $3.99, but renews to $99 a year. So it just kind of
Okay.
gives you some extra, it includes the courses as well.
Okay. Marketing 101, right? Give people the chance
Yeah,
to pay more if they're willing to pay more.
got to have the value ladder.
So, why did you pick that price, $99 per year, and not, for example, three times as much or half as much?
Yeah, that was basically as low as I was willing to go, and I wanted to make sure that price wasn't an issue, but that it wasn't so cheap that it would sort of be like a no brainer. Like if I charged $19 a year, it would just be I would get the same sort of maybe spammy or uninterested people in the first place. So
Mm.
I felt like that sweet spot of, it's just high enough for people to have to think about it, but it's also at the very lowest end of the spectrum of what you could charge for a community, because there are some that charge $500 a year, $1,000 a year. There's some associations that charge $2,000 a year, and so yeah, that just felt like the lowest that I could go and get people bought in. And that could change over time, although I don't
Mm.
really think that I will. I kind of like that price where it's, if I can deliver $1,000 of value a year and people only pay 99, then it's gonna be a no brainer. I'm going to keep those people for a long time.
Mm.
I'd rather have really low churn than sort of extract all the money that I can out of people.
Yeah. I think if you put the price up way more, you'd attract a different type of person anyway. It wouldn't be the same community.
Right.
A long time ago, I joined an SEO community that was charging $300 a month. I stayed a member for 2 months and then got like panicked, like, wait, what am I doing? I'm throwing money away. I should be spending this money on other things or putting it in the bank account. So,
Yeah.
but I think at $99 per year, I think I could like be far more relaxed.
Hmm. Yeah.
So you told us how you got the original members of the Swipe Files community, but what about today? How are you finding new members
Yeah. That's kind of that's the
from
question,
coming
right?
on
So,
podcasts like this?
right. I mean, I have a couple of different forms of marketing. So I have two podcasts. One is Default Alive, which is very similar to this. Actually, it's just kind of it's me, my friend Chris Spagnuolo, who runs JetBoost, a SaaS business, and it's just us kind of doing like a weekly. We were already doing these weekly kind of accountability calls, but then we're like, okay, let's record it and make it a podcast. Why not? It'll be extra public accountability. So I have that one, and I think that uh, attracts some sort of entrepreneur and founder. I also have the Everything is Marketing podcast, and that launched back in February, and that definitely attracts more of the marketing kind of crowd. I have a newsletter which with a few thousand subscribers, and so every one of those is sort of a way to get people in the door, introduce them to Swipe Files and sort of what the membership is. I have a welcome series. It's just sort of introduces people to what's next, right? And even within the sign up flow, if you go to landing page today, possibly, you can subscribe, and then like it'll flip over to like a step 2, which will be like, do you want to become a member? And you can like select a membership or not. You don't have to. But basically, the newsletter is a good way for me to just like get content out there, produce, and just like showcase some expertise or value. There's also my personal Twitter, which I put a lot of time and effort, and going to continue to pour more into that, because Twitter is a great tool. I'm a big Twitter fan and user. It's like the only social platform that I use, and it has amazing reach. And so there's always a good amount of people who discover Swipe Files that way, just because of what I'm sharing about Swipe Files, or just what I'm sharing through Swipe Files within the community, or just the content in the newsletter. And that's pretty much it. Those are like the core kind of tenets. There's the podcast, there's the newsletter, there's like newsletters now. So I have the Tiny Marketing Ideas newsletter, and then my Twitter. And it's fairly simple. I go on other people's podcasts. I do online talks and webinars and workshops. Sometimes I'll do a guest post here and there, but those are the main 3.
Okay, thanks. That sounds like, again, like we can learn not just from being a member, but actually looking at the way you run the thing. I'm surprised to hear you say that Twitter is useful. I struggle getting value out of Twitter. It's become my social media platform of choice, and I do try and promote both my 2 products on there. And I kind of wonder if I'm wasting my time or doing it all wrong. Well, although it's good for this podcast, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about how you use it, right? And also the
Yeah.
people that you connect with. And I think Twitter is amazing because it's, Instagram is very like highlight reel, photos. LinkedIn is very like, trying to say it politely. It's basically just a people for like an ego boost. You know what I mean? Where it's just like you just share, and people kind of make a bigger deal out of themselves than they would, and it's just all about like these. If you look, the content's kind of weird. And Facebook, like I'm not even going to go there. Twitter is like one of the only places where you actually find genuine, authentic content, and it's where all the like intellectual people share their thoughts. Right? It's kind of like it's blogging for people who don't have a blog or are too lazy to blog, or even blog and sort of they post it to Twitter anyways. And there's great sharing mechanisms in there. Twitter DMs are really, really powerful. Like the people you can connect with on Twitter is really powerful. So it's all about how you make use of it. I think that long term, it's a great investment if you can get that kind of compounding return. I'm not even like at the point, I think, where Twitter is like one of the main like acquisition drivers, but it's definitely one of the main connectors. And from there, like basically every opportunity I've ever had has been through Twitter. So even just like without the face value of like attribution, it's sort of like the secondary value of all those effects.
Fantastic. You mentioned the podcast Everything is Marketing. By the way, I think I recently discovered why you picked that name. Is it some famous marketer guy said this like 20 or 30 years ago? He claimed that everything is marketing. Have I found the right connection there?
Yeah, there's an old HBR article that I love, and it's called Marketing is Everything and Everything is Marketing. And it was written in 1989, I believe. So it's about 30, 31 years ago, maybe 32 years ago, I guess. And yeah, he basically outlined sort of his thoughts for how the internet was going to change the dynamics of marketing, and how every single interaction and sort of brand presence was going to become a marketing opportunity. And I was just like, wow, that's one, I had always admired that and loved that. And somehow I fell upon it. But two, when I started the podcast, I felt like that really embodied, again, this premise I have where diversity of thought and diversity of people and backgrounds and experience in industries really encapsulated my thoughts on marketing, that marketing is more than just throwing an ad on, one of the platforms. It was really about the way that you interact with people, your reputation, sort of the way that you earn trust, where you are and how you present yourself online. And so, to answer your question, that's where it's from.
Okay. This has become one of the podcasts on my regular rotation at the moment. This year, one of my tasks or goals is to get more systematic about marketing and learn more. And this podcast has been very helpful so far, especially an episode you had with, is her name Val
Val
Geisler?
Geisler. Yeah.
Yeah, that one was excellent on emails. Yeah, really excellent.
Oh, yeah.
So how long have you been doing that podcast?
Man, I started recording in late October, and then I was recording. So I wanted to my goal was to get 10 episodes to launch with, and then to have a few in the queue so that I could also launch pretty quickly, maybe 2 episodes a week for a couple of weeks. And then what happened was, I was recording through like December, the holidays came around, and then I was working on the podcast cover art. And then there was a couple other things I just wasn't sure about, like the format that I was trying to experiment with. So I didn't actually launch until February 8th, but I started working on it all the way back in October.
Okay. And how's that going for you?
It's going really good. I think the main challenge is that podcasts are really, really hard to market and really, really hard to grow, as you would probably know and experience. You need like longevity. Definitely, the longer you've been around or the earlier that you started, the better. But it doesn't have a lot of the discovery mechanism. There's like no sharing mechanism really either. Audio is a big commitment. Like usually people only do it in very specific circumstances, like they're washing the dishes or they're driving in the car, they're walking the dog, they're doing something really mundane, maybe yard work or something, right? And so it's a big commitment to like get into someone's podcast feed and then to get them to press play on your episode, right? And so, it's been going good. I'm lucky already. I think I've sort of I've broken some of those initial milestones of like, I think I'm like top 25% of podcasts. Still, much lower download numbers than what that I'm in. I'm in triple digits. I love to be in quadruple digits, but it's going well. I've really been enjoying it. It's something that I love doing. I love podcasting. The guests are amazing. There's sort of a flywheel as well, because a lot of the ideas from the podcast I use for the newsletter, for the community. I invite them back in to do an AMA or a workshop, and so again, some secondary benefits there besides just the raw download numbers.
It's good to hear that even a person who's making a role for themselves as an expert in marketing struggles with marketing a podcast. That's really comforting for me to hear. We go weeks or months without any significant growth in downloads, and then some random thing happens that I have no control over, and we suddenly get like a 10% spike. And we tend to stay. After there's a spike, we tend to stay there. But how to make those happen, I don't know. I have no idea. I was hoping you'd be able to tell me.
Yeah,
actually, that was my secret reason for asking you how it's been going with your podcast. I thought you'd tell me all these secrets.
Yeah, so to give you context, I think my the Everything's Marketing podcast, the average downloads are around 300 per episode. The largest one is around 500. It's been growing steadily. It's about 10% week over week right now, which will probably slow down over time, but maybe not. I hope not. But that's just because that's been mainly driven off of my newsletter and my personal Twitter. What I'd like to start doing, I think the real opportunities, like the 2 big opportunities to grow your podcasts, are to create these sort of video snippets and clips and audiograms and transcripts where it becomes more shareable. Like you have to create that sharing mechanism. And then for the discovery side of things, so I was talking with Jay Klaus again yesterday for the podcast. He also has 2 very successful podcasts. One just crossed 500,000 downloads, and it's about 10,000 downloads per episode. So he's like a 1%er in the podcast world. And he was telling me that 99% of that is because of getting featured in these collections in some of the podcast players. So in Apple, he was in like a new like lifestyle and creativity collection that Apple was pushing. He's also been featured in Stitcher and in like a bunch of the different podcast players. And he got that through his podcast network, the Podglomerate. And so he was like, look, I don't know if there's anything to like teach here besides maybe like get a network one day or like
Yeah.
try to get featured in these, you can actually you can apply, but they're very curated, it's very competitive. And so I was surprised to learn that, but that's how he got there. And maybe there's some way for me to do that or for other people to do that later, or there's other podcast players that have more discovery built in possibly. But it's hard. Podcast marketing is like my personal kind of challenge is to create a really successful podcast, because I feel like if you can create a really successful podcast, you can market anything. Like that's like the top of the food chain. It's so difficult.
Yeah, yeah, I'm hearing you. But your friend who managed to get 10,000 downloads per episode, one thing he did right is he actually has a podcast. He's recording episodes. I'm sure he's one of these people who's like clockwork, getting an episode out every
Yeah.
week or whatever his schedule is. And like, I think that's a prerequisite. And then when something good comes around, at least you're in the right place, rather than saying, well, I don't know, I'll never get that many, I just give up, or I'll just do it when I feel like it.
Yeah, you have to start. I'm always a shoot your shot kind of person. You have to try. You have to get something out there. Um, and of course, if you don't try, if you don't have a podcast thing, you're never going to get there. So you might as well start and try. And I think, again, the podcast, even if it doesn't have ginormous podcast download numbers,
Mm-hmm.
if it's a really engaged audience, even if there's just a couple of members that come out of that or some sort of secondary effect, I'm also happy with that as well. So it's not purely about the vanity metrics.
Excellent. So, what was the other podcast you said? You told me the name, but it's passed through my head already.
That's good. Yeah,
Default Alive. Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry,
Default Alive.
Default Alive. I'm sorry, trying to say
Yeah.
it not with a New Zealand accent.
No,
Default.
no. I love it.
and
Default Alive.
and that's just your buddy and you catching up weekly. Did you say?
Yep, weekly. That's also
So,
from an old article from Paul Graham where he calls it, I think it's Default Alive or Default Dead. And he basically talks about like there's two modes for a startup. You're either Default Alive, Default Dead. One being like you have enough, like you're profitable, you're not profitable, basically. And so Chris, it was sort of like our journey of like, hey, we're recording how we're going to get to Default Alive. Chris got to Default Alive in December, I think it was. I'm lagging behind. I think I might get there this summer, maybe. But
okay.
but that's what the podcast sort of centered around.
How does Default Alive look for you? You said you'll get there in summer. What would that envisage?
Yeah, I mean, my personal goal is to get 1,000 true fans, quote unquote. Another homage to an old article. I'm like just realizing this theme. It's kind of funny, but 1,000 paid members for Swipe Files would be above Default Alive. But that's like my personal goal that I want to get to, be very, very sustainable. But realistically, I need to get to around 600 members to get to around Default Alive. That would kind of be like break even profitability for me.
Listeners, if you want to help Corey out here, achieve his Default Alive goal, why don't you go and join the Swipe Files community?
Yeah.
Then he'll be closer to Default Alive. I actually wanted to ask a question about the Default Alive podcast. You said that you were having weekly accountability sessions and then you just decided to record it. But surely that recording of it has changed what you're willing to say. Like we're all putting on a brave face, right? Even if we're open, there's some things we just don't want to share about what we're feeling and thinking. How's that affected your ability to have these accountability sessions?
Yeah, it's changed the dynamic a little bit for sure. I mean, even Chris and I, will shoot the breeze and talk about ideas that we have that we could build together, or I'll talk about the things that I'm struggling with, or personal finances, or how I had a crazy week. There are some things to leave. I'll mention actually, if you can see behind me, there's a leopard gecko, which is not mine; it's a friend's, who is in the hospital right now. And it's like stuff like that. Like I wouldn't really, I would share with him like, dude, I had a crazy weekend. I didn't get any work done on Monday, but on Tuesday when we record, I'm putting a brave face and things are interesting. And I don't think that's always the best way to go. I could probably be a little bit more transparent, but I don't know if all that has changed. There's just a small amount of things that I don't share in the podcast. It's maybe a little bit more like the way that I share it and the tone that changes a little bit, because I want to be a little bit more upbeat and a little bit more exciting, and I want to be a little bit more organized instead of just like chatting and I'm just kind of like talking off the top of my head. So but yeah, there's a difference.
It makes for better audio anyway.
Yeah.
Look, Corey, we're running out of time, so it's time to wrap up. Thanks again for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And by the way, there's also, so you mentioned the call to action if you wanted to help me. I only create discount codes and coupons for podcasts I go on. So for any members or any people interested, Bootstrapped FM will get you half off a Swipe Files membership, all the way down to $49 a year for the first year. But we'd love to have you. It's not like a sort of a just a play for me again to get money, but if it's valuable and it's interesting, it's a private community. We'd love to have you.
Okay, so that coupon for $49, did you say, for a year's membership
Yeah.
is
Mhm.
Bootstrapped FM?
Correct.
Okay, excellent. And where should our listeners go if they want to use that? What's the location they have to go to put that in?
Yeah, it's swipefiles.com/membership. You can also find me on Twitter and DM me, or just email me at Corey@swipefiles.com, and I'll get you situated there. So, but the membership actual page, if you go to the landing page, it's kind of like a newsletter squeeze page a little bit. So swipefiles.com/membership, and then you can click explore memberships, and I'll take you down to the pricing.
Okay, of course, I'll make sure that's in the show notes. Okay, thanks again, Corey.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. It's been fun.
Bye, everybody.